Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 22nd of January 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, deep behind the technical desk, is Mike Robinson. And we're going to be joined by live Skype link by David Scott with Northern Exposure. Where has January gone? Am I the only one that thinks time is speeding up? But January almost disappeared. And I think we're in for an exciting ride this year. Well, the weather, the good news is that it's brightened up in Plymouth. It started off particularly grey, dismal, rainy. We've now got blue sky and sunshine. Reports across the country are mixed. London seems to be okay. Hampshire is okay. But a few other people reporting wet in Hampshire, I beg your pardon. Isle of Man, southeast London seems to be okay, so variable across the country. But let's see what's happening north of Hadrian's Wall. David, have we got you?
Yes, up here in the frozen north, after a morning of greyness and much rain, we're actually seeing a little bit of blue sky appearing now, so it's looking up.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we thought we'd just kick off with the interesting story of the Church of England, immensely powerful organisation, of course, huge influence still over millions of people, and in the background, coffers stuffed with billions of pounds of money. But we've been very curious as why Archbishop of Canterbury, Mr. Welby, would not answer simple questions about his relationship with the Wolf Institute, which was the organisation behind the recent report which suggested that Britain was no longer a Christian country and we should back off from Christianity. And as we pointed out, it seemed strange that Archbishop Welby would take part in this event, which was seemingly undermining the Christian church in Britain. So we've tried to email, we've tried telephone calls asking for a simple response. Can he explain his relationship with the Wolf Institute and that anti-Christian report? And can they disclose how much funding George Soros provided the two organisations that produced the report? So there we are. At the moment, a stunning silence from the Church of England. They tried obfuscation first of all. Now it appears a wall of silence. So clearly truth, one of the key teachings, not applicable to Church of England or Archbishop Welby. Just a quick comment on this one, David, but it's quite remarkable, isn't it, that you can't get a simple statement out of the church, never mind the government.
It is quite remarkable. Of course, the bishops are appointed in England by the government. Isn't that correct? I seem to remember a Yes Prime Minister sketch all those years ago when the Prime Minister had to appoint a bishop, and Sir Humphrey Appleby pointed out that he must do this in order to maintain the balance in the Church of England. And when he said, what balance? The answer was, well, the balance between those who believe in God and those who don't. So maybe we've got the wrong sort of leadership.
Certainly got the wrong sort of leadership. Thank you for that astute comment, and we'll continue to keep our finger on the pulse with that one. But is George Soros helping to fund the Church of England? That's the key question, it appears. Well, if people are up to slightly dubious activities in the church, elsewhere we've got criminals at work. But you've kindly provided us with this wonderful headline, which I'll just put straight up on screen. And David, perhaps you can tell us a bit about it. No criminals, they're customers.
They're customers, yes. This was in the Scottish Daily Mail this week. It seems that our wise overlords in the Scottish Parliament, realising there are things that are very difficult with the criminal justice system, reintegrating people into society being one of them, having some sort of view of redemption and forgiveness, although that's a religious concept and we don't talk about that, but they realise it is necessary for people to turn their lives around. But they don't any longer have anything substantial to say on the matter. So what we're going to do, instead of having substantial ideas and firm opinions based on beliefs that can be defended and explained, we're going to have language. We're going to have newspeak. So we're not going to call them offenders anymore because that might upset people and make them feel alienated. No, we're going to call them service users or customers or something else ridiculous like that. This has gone down badly with the various groups representing the victims of crime in Scotland, as you can imagine, and it shows the incoherence and absence of ideas at the very highest level of our government.
Or else we've got politicians who are being reframed into La La Land. Well, the subject of child abuse, we've never let this go. We're not going to let it go because, of course, the power at the heart of government and the establishment hangs on blackmail of people either involved or complicit by their silence in the abuse of children. But one of the worrying trends that we're noticing is that in very serious cases, this is happens to be the Mail report, but children as young as 8 forced to perform sex acts. And now we've got animals coming in. This is the sort of thing that, of course, victims have always talked about. But once again, this case has been drifted through the secrecy of the family court. So you've got a subject which, in my opinion, should be absolutely brought into open court and certainly in front of the public, because the public are the ones who need to know what's really going on. No, because children are involved, you drift it through the family courts, where, of course, everything can be gently slowed down, names, identities hushed up. So this is a very serious case. David, I don't know what your take would be.
Yeah, the family courts and the equivalent in Scotland is, of course, the children's hearing system, children's panel system, which has been long viewed in Scotland as a wonderful thing that is the envy of the world, and strangely not copied by any other nation anywhere on the planet. The children's hearing system, when it first came in, actually did seem to work very well because it had a lot of lay people dealing with practical problems in practical ways. It's becoming increasingly professionalised with all the secrecy and jobs the boys that go with that. Like the family court in England, the hearing system in Scotland is based on civil standards of evidence and of proof. So everything is done based on the balance of probability, a very uncertain concept. So when you're looking at the decisions being made affecting families and tearing families apart, it's all done on the balance of probability, not on beyond reasonable doubt. And when you're dealing with crimes like this, that seems to be in an entirely inappropriate world to be working in.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to stay with that. Now, on the subject, of course, of children and child abuse, we've suddenly got a very interesting skew coming into the media. And who's at the centre of that? Well, it's President Putin.
Yes, so I'm going to highlight this article in the Mail. This is by Edward Lucas, who, of course, is a senior editor at The Economist, so absolutely British establishment writing here. And he is trying to keep some momentum in the report that came out yesterday over the Litvinenko affair. And he is saying, for example, that Sir Robert also highlights other possibilities. That this is for the reason for the murder, the personal antagonism between Litvinenko and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. For example, Litvinenko accused Mr. Putin of staging a series of apartment block bombings in 1999 that killed more than 300 people. His aim to create a climate of fear in which Russians would yearn for a strong leader. Now, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds very like conspiracy theory.
It's absolutely conspiracy theory because we are seeing constantly no evidence produced by the British government. And this latest report, of course, is possibles and probables, but no evidence.
So it seems that conspiracy theory is allowed when it permits a certain narrative, but it's not allowed in other circumstances. And then it goes on. Lucas goes on to say, more sensationally, Mr. Litvinenko also accused Mr. Putin of being a practicing paedophile. So here is the article that was originally published. And it said, a few days ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin walked from the big Kremlin palace to his residence at one of the Kremlin squares. The president stopped to chat with the tourists. Among them was a boy aged 4 or 5. "What's your name?" Putin asked. "Nikita," the boy replied. Putin kneeled, lifted the boy's t-shirt and kissed his stomach. The world was shocked. Nobody can understand why the Russian president did such a strange thing as kissing the stomach of an unfamiliar small boy. The explanation may be found if we look carefully at what's called the blank spots in Putin's biography, and he describes that Putin was held back in his career because certain people had discovered that he was a paedophile. Now, our experience of this type of situation in political circles is that, in fact, if you're interested in these types of activities, you're more likely to receive a promotion. You're not going to find your career held back. So that's one thing to consider. But let's just look at the actual video clip. So just taking a little section from the time. That's Putin speaking to the boy. And this is what happened. So while that's on, then subsequently Putin was in discussion with the BBC and described what had happened. And he basically said that the child seemed very independent and serious, and that he wanted to respect that, and that's how it came out. So I decided I would ask Alex Thompson from Eastern Approaches about this, because I thought this was an important to get, because two reasons. I wanted to know what the Russian news report was about, and also wanted to get some view from Alex, who's spent quite a lot of time in that kind of area, what the sort of cultural aspect of this is. So this is what he had to say. I'm just going to read it in full. "I've been wondering since this happened in 2006 and created a brief flurry, when it might be invoked by the West in a tight spot. It's quite normal for any Russian man of any stature to show benevolence to children, especially boys, as this avoids the appearance of sexual impropriety with someone's daughter who might take it amiss. By ruffling their hair, pinching their cheek, I saw a lot of Chechen men in Tbilisi doing this, and some business types with Moscow and St. Petersburg as well. So while Russian politicians eschew the kiss the baby and the pram technique, not least because Russian mothers wouldn't hang around for a cooey moment with a VIP, they have too much respect for their babies and themselves to become part of a vote-winning gimmick. Boys and young men are given physical attention by Russian strongmen as a kind of inspiring compliment. The statement this conveys is, you're vigorous enough to build a nation. The further east you go, the more pronounced this is. Poles and Hungarians will hug a promising young man. Russians, especially Caucasians and Middle Easterners, will kiss him, and Far Eastern grandfatherly types will fondle his biceps and stroke his beard. My reading of the red square kiss, given that a male's bare chest is his seat of manliness in Russia, and a potbelly is derided as no use for facing the enemy, is that Putin was telling the lad he was already a valued defender of the fatherland, to use Russian synonym for male. So that's Alex's take on it. I don't know if you've got a view, Brian.
Well, I'm going to stick with the fact that it's just remarkable the timing that this has been pushed into the public domain. So, of course, we've seen the immense media effort against President Putin because of what he's been doing in Syria. We've got mountains of evidence that the British government complicit in at least the covering up of paedophile activity. But of course, we've even had previous Tory chief whips admitting that when people were abusing boys, that information was used in order to effectively blackmail them to following Tory policy. What didn't happen was the information wasn't passed to the police. So we see huge pressure coming on the British government, members of Parliament and the establishment for their involvement and complicity in the cover-up of child abuse. That pressure had to go somewhere. So what do? You turn around and accuse President Putin. Now, I'm going to bring in David shortly, but just somebody sent us a really excellent analysis of what President Putin had achieved in Syria. So let's just bring up some of the points on screen. And we're going to say, why is Cameron so desperate to attack and smear Russia and President Putin? Well, it's because of this. This was, according to our viewer, the plan to stabilise the Syrian government. Well, President Putin's achieved that. A war of attrition against Daesh, that's in progress. That's going extremely well. Rebuild the Syrian armed forces, that's well in progress. Establish permanent Russian presence, that's been done. Prevent the imposition of a no-fly zone by US NATO. That was absolutely critical because, of course, once NATO controls the sky, they also control what happens on the ground. Putin's got in there and stopped that straight away. Force the empire to negotiate with Assad. Well, we're seeing that. Suddenly there's softer language being used with Assad. Disrupt the Turkish, Saudi and Qatari support for Daesh. Well, clearly that's happening. Co-opt as much as possible of the armed forces to Assad into a common anti-Daesh front. Well, this is working extremely well, and we should have a few more. Provide military aid to Iran and Hezbollah. That is happening at the moment. Keep the Daesh combatants away from Russia and her allies in the Caucasus and Central Asia. And try to convince the Europeans that their stance in the Middle East and elsewhere is self-defeating. And finally, well, of course, Putin would like to drive a wedge between the US and Europe. Probably hasn't happened, but of course, Hollande went to the US a while ago. Damp squib, I think is the correct expression. So 12 very good reasons as to why David Cameron wants to protect the British Parliament, drowning in evidence of the abuse of children, the cover-up of the abuse of children. We'll try and pour it all onto Putin because of his success in Syria. Are we somewhere close, David?
Yes, I think that's good. In terms of analysis of the Syrian situation, that was first class. That's exactly where we're at. You would have to say that as President Obama was given the Nobel Peace Prize for showing up, basically, and has done nothing, you'd have to wonder what sort of prize Putin is actually due, because he has stopped the disintegration into violent anarchy of a large part of the Middle East, or at least stopped it for the moment. And we should be all very grateful for that. As far as the accusation of paedophilia is concerned, unlike the British case, there doesn't seem to be any victim coming forward to say anything. There doesn't seem to be anything other than political opponents saying these things. In Britain, we have a situation where we know that 2 former heads of MI6 were most certainly abusing children. We know that a former Speaker of the House of Commons was most certainly abusing children. And we've got a huge list of cabinet ministers, former Home Secretaries, and quite possibly right up to Prime Minister level, also guilty of this. We're not short of evidence. We're drowning in evidence despite the mysterious tendency it has to disappear. So, yes, let us concentrate on our own paedophiles, I think.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to that subject a little bit, but first of all, we'll just reinforce the Russia bit, because Russian Insider here, a very good article, Voting is for Chumps. Veteran congressional staffer says the deep state already controls America. So here are the Russians pointing a finger at the USA and quite rightly saying, your democracy's already gone. You should be looking at your own administration as to what is actually happening in America. So it's going to be interesting to watch how this one pans out. And of course, we've got people calling for David Cameron to deal with Russia because of the murder on the cup of tea murder. So somebody's saying, well, one man has died. It's time for you, David Cameron, to turn against Russia. Well, that will be interesting. But let's come on to this one, and that is that LBC claims to be one of the premier channels that trust us. We are telling the truth. No subject is too much for us. And of course, they invited on none other than Alex Salmond, who was going to be on air, and he was going to answer questions, except it appears he doesn't want to answer questions on Holly Gregg. And a number of people have been calling the programme. They've been wanting to ask Alex Salmond live about the documentation. David, I'll give over to you in two seconds, of course, because you're well up to speed on that. And what has happened? Well, it appears that LBC is protecting Alex Salmond. So Ian Dale's the man who's been running the programme. No questions about Holly Gregg, child abuse issue, is getting through to Alex Salmond. Or there's a dirty little deal been done in the background to make sure that information isn't discussed. Either way, we phoned this morning, couldn't get anybody to give us an answer. We're going to try again this afternoon. And then we have this. This is a letter from LBC's Nick Ferrari, one of the heavy hitters of the channel. He's had some pretty simple documentation spelling out why Alex Salmond needs to answer some questions. But he says it's a very complicated story. The inference is that it's a little bit too complicated for him. And he suggests that people should call the programme, which happens to be the same programme, of course, that won't put the questions to Alex Salmond in the first place. David, this is in your face censorship, isn't it?
Yes. Look, just briefly let us review how Alex Salmond became central to this. The basic point, the basic position of what at that time was Grampian Police, is that a full and thorough investigation into child rape in Scotland does not involve questioning the people accused of carrying out the rape, nor does it involve questioning other people who were claimed to be victims. This convinced nobody. So without any support from either the Crown Office, Procurator Fiscal Service, or from Grampian Police, where did people campaigning for justice go? They went to our wise overlords, and at that point, it was First Minister Alex Salmond, and got nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing came back, no public statements, no expressions of concern, no pushing the police to do more, no calling for an inquiry, zilch. So then people started to ask questions of Mr. Salmond. When did you know about this? Why haven't you done anything? And he refused to answer those questions. And when pushed by the Information Commissioner, eventually answered them and then lied about it in writing to people who were inquiring as to what was going on. So it's a very untidy, murky-looking world there where Mr. Salmond has become involved in this because of an inability, it would seem, to stand up for the most vulnerable in our society, which is, after all, if we pay him for anything, what we pay him for.
Right, thank you very much for that. Well, the whole situation gets compounded, of course, because the Scots have been, for many years, putting some pretty good whiskey south of the border, but we've given you a Gormley. So here we are, the new Chief Constable, but he's got a murky past with the Met Police Special Branch back in 2006 and the Special Demonstration Squad. These were the groups that were infiltrating, potential domestic terrorists, but it was okay for the police officers to have sexual relationships with women. He, of course, says, I knew nothing at the time. We seem to have given you one, David.
Another one. My point here is this is Groundhog Day. We got a recycled, is it something sort of superannuation scheme for the Met Police? We'll send you on holiday to Scotland. It's very nice up there. There's lots of whiskey and there's lots of nice scenery. And the natives are really pretty tame. Compared to London, it'll be a breeze. Because we got Sir Stephen House immediately after he was involved in all of the decisions that ended up with the assassination of an entirely innocent gentleman called John Charles de Jimenez, who was simply trying to go about his lawful business. And now we've got Phil Gormley, Bletherskite Phil, as we pointed out a couple of weeks ago, And he is the man in charge of all of the undercover squads who were doing various things they really oughtn't to have been doing, including, I think, proposing marriage in one case to a woman and fathering a child in another case. But Phil knew nothing. So that's reassuring.
Well, perhaps we could just add at that point that maybe we should believe him, because when we've been talking to Met police officers over the past few months, some of them, particularly those who got knowledge of anti-terrorism stuff, say that the whole system's out of control. Nobody's working to proper mission with paperwork. It is out of control. So if it is out of control, maybe it was out of control, maybe he didn't know. I've got the BBC programme transcript here from the Stockwell Countdown to Killing with this piece of text which goes with it. I hope this is in the right sequence. Did you want to comment on this one?
Yes. Yes. Just before we get to that, on the subject of did he know and could he have known? This is the difference between bureaucracy and leadership. I'm quite sure that Mr. Gormley is an efficient bureaucrat. I'm sure he wouldn't be in the position that he's in if he's not an efficient bureaucrat. The difference between a bureaucrat and a leader is a bureaucrat will go happily not knowing. A leader will regard it as his job to find out. And if he doesn't, he will resign, not get promoted. It's an entirely different concept of what they're there to do. And I think that's why I'm less than happy about Mr. Gormley's posting to Scotland. But yes, as I was coming on, looking at this and reviewing all of the situation regarding Sir Stephen House, and before he came to Scotland, I came on this this bit of text here, which was an actual interview with Sir Stephen House about the shooting of John Charlton de Menez, and it's quite clear that there was a code word that was, shoot him in the head. There was a code word for assassinating this man. Don't know what the code word was. I suspect there's a reason we don't know that. There is a code word. It was given by very senior people at the Met. It must have been involving House himself, and all of the stuff that he subsequently said about, well, we don't shoot to kill, we shoot to incapacitate, is clearly nonsense, because this was clearly saying it was a code word for lethal force. That's a shoot to kill policy, right there.
Okay, right. Well, just move on a bit, but with a little bit of a smile, because unfortunately I did have a very good image. There's a campaign of people to protect beavers north of the border. They want to plant trees and protect beavers. I think beavers are being shot, or maybe it's a drone attack. I don't know what's being used on the beavers, but apparently we want more trees and beavers because this is going to protect us from climate change. This is serious. I'm not joking about this subject. But you produced this image, and I immediately thought of the poor old beaver.
Well, yeah, this is Groundhog Day, because we are there again, and I actually thought that the groundhog and Mr. Gormley do have a slight similarity. It's something about the expression that just made me think of a groundhog. So,
okay, thank you for that.
To avoid confusion.
Right, brilliant. Well, I'm just going to briefly jump back to LBC, because while we were looking up what they had to say about Mr. Salmon, we noticed here that we've got quite a prominent advert for Nigel Farage on UKIP. He's not talking about criminality and treason in the British government. He's suddenly got very interested in the Cologne sex attacks. And, well, that's a very interesting statement. They will happen in UK. Does he know that they're going to happen? I don't know. Let's follow on through, because you've produced this one for us, that where are they putting the Syrian refugees? Well, they're putting them on an island. Is this Britain's version of Alcatraz? I wonder. No disrespect to the people of Butte. But of course, if you want to set up detention camps, England's a bit tricky. You might go to Dartmoor. Well, that's been done before for the French prisoners of war. But the place I would start to put dissidents and political prisoners is in Scotland. And the Mail reporting, and what have we got here? we got something else, that they're heaven sent because the Syrian refugees are going to help the Scottish economy recover from the Isle of Bute. How does this work, David?
Work well, yes. Isn't it incoherent and strange? You've got some people coming from a war zone, and we're taking in about 4,000 at the moment. So it's a very small number across Great Britain. Disproportionately large number are coming to Scotland. There's 1,000 of those are coming to Scotland, and a disproportionately large number are going to Bute. So you concentrate them all on a small island, and island communities in Scotland, the economics of living on an island are quite marginal. They're quite even Bute, which is in the Firth of Clyde and not that far from Glasgow, because you're a ferry journey away and what have you. It's quite a marginal economy and quite a sensitive area. It seems a very strange choice to put a very large proportion of the number of asylum refugees that we're bringing in a place like that. It seemed to be the place that would be most likely to have a disproportionate effect upon the local community. It's just an odd choice. And then you get Mike Russell. Mike Russell's one of the men at the heart of the named person scheme, or at least he was in overall control when it was brought forward, and he didn't stop it. I don't know how convinced he was by it, but he let it go forward. He's now saying that, yes, what we need is, and this is a theme that we've seen for many, many years. You can find articles going back to 2003 on this. Scotland is underpopulated, is the view. We need more people, is the view. And we need to bring them in terms of refugees. Now, the reason that Scotland is underpopulated is entirely, essentially, our own fault, that we have not made the best of the opportunities that we've got, and that it's ultimately economic drivers that are making that happen. So simply transplanting people from foreign countries in will not change that. It's a very bizarre and very naive statement that all we need is more people. What's that? More consumers? More workers? Are these people going to work harder or for less money? Or how does it change the situation in Scotland? I don't see it. I think it's a very short-sighted and very incoherent view.
Or it's a masterly piece of politics taking us to the new world, basically. Well, if that gentleman was getting on a bit, I think I'm allowed to say that, of course it's the younger political generation that are going to take us in the right place. So we'd like to bring in Will Straw, because this is the executive director of Britain is Stronger in Europe. Remarkable organisation. We're going to be delving into this. I believe this young man is Jack Straw's son. And what is he big in? Well, he's big in Blackburn Rovers and cycling, but this is the man who we should all believe that we should be staying in Britain and staying in Europe. And his organisation was pushing out the the pro-European, I'll get there in a minute, the pro-European paperwork that anybody who dared criticise the European Union completely wrong. Now, you've been doing a bit of detective work, and you tweeted out this: Goldman Sachs funds the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign.
Yes, there's it was buried in an article mostly about Cameron and what he was saying about the deal he's about to get and how wonderful it's going to be. There was a note that we've got 7-figure sum of funding coming from the Goldman Sachs. The vampire squid itself is funding the Britain Stay in Europe campaign. This is the same organisation who engineered almost single-handedly the entry of Greece into the European Union. So the very fact that they're backing that should maybe make us think again.
Well, we're certainly thinking again, and we're going to stay with it because this is dangerous politicking behind the scenes. In fact, it's treason, but let's work our way through it. But you picked up on Jim Sellers. This was in the Scotsman. And he's basically saying, well, we can have a debate about EU. Is this real, or is this man playing games?
No, he's been a long time opponent of the SNP's pro-European policy. The traditional SNP policy, dating back before the Salmond regime, was that we wanted to be independent from everybody, and that meant not being part of either NATO or the EU. Now, there's a consistency in that, and there is it addresses a lot of very genuine concerns. It means something if you're talking about independence in those terms. It means something that you're actually able to direct your own future. If you're in Europe, if you're in NATO, how much independence do you really have? How much independence does Britain really have? Surprisingly little. So this is part of the old school of the Scottish National Party, who are still in there, and they're still saying, well, really, we don't want the EU. So it just illustrates the fact that the simple black and white division between left-wing is pro-Europe, Scotland is pro-Europe, and right-wing reactionary England is anti-Europe is a gross oversimplification. And the truth is that the people who are old school, the people who have a set of values, almost irrespective of what those values are, but have a set of values that they believe in, are much more likely to see through the EU than the modern political types who seem to bend with the wind.
Okay, excellent. So probably we should be supporting people who are coming out with the right opinion on Europe, even though we might not agree with everything they have to say. Well, let's have a look in more detail at who's on the board of Britain Stronger in Europe. Now, this might have changed slightly. I'm afraid I haven't got a date on it, but it came from the Financial Times. So there might have been some changes, but it's indicative. We've got Stuart Rose, Conservative peer, former chairman of Marks and Spencer. So obviously stay in Europe and you're going to get a better quality of lingerie and you can pay in euros. Danny Alexander, well, very key man, Chief Secretary to the Treasury. I thought some of these people, if they're civil servants, shouldn't be acting in a political sense, but all that's gone out of the way. Brendan Barber from Trades Union, people from the University of Liverpool. West Ham Limited, Karen Brady, obviously critical that we've got the views of people running football teams, National Union of Students. Peter Mandelson, well, he's known for his, what is he known for? Well, nothing positive, I don't think, so no wonder he's backing the EU. When we get down to the bottom, I was very interesting to see we've got this man, former head of the British military, Peter Wall, and I find this very odd because he hasn't suddenly sprung onto this camp. So is his loyalty to Britain or the EU? I think this man is standing on very dodgy ground because the EU is clearly attempting to subvert this nation. We've got ladies like this one, the Halpern founder, Jenny Halpern Prince. What interested me is she had this to say: no matter what happens, you always need to be able to tell the truth. Well, you'll see why I've picked up on that comment. But here's the new head of the military, Sir Stuart Peach. Looks pretty formidable man. I wonder whether he understands what subversion is and whether he can recognise it in his own country. Is he capable of understanding material like this? Now, I don't know who the person was who sourced this, but I'd like to thank them. It's the Memorandum of Association for the European Movement of the United Kingdom. And you can read through this document and they tell you what they are into. So they're going to organise by lawful means conferences, public discussions to arrange for panels of lecturers. This is the powerhouse, one of the powerhouses behind the scenes for promoting the European Union. It says it's lawful there at the beginning, by lawful moves. And then it says this: to undertake educational and social and propaganda and other activities. So their words, not mine, to undertake educational and social and propaganda and other activities. And of course, if you look at the definition of propaganda, propaganda includes lying. So, head of Britain's military, can you understand what's going on? Are there any senior military officers, retired officers, who understand what's going on? Are they all too frightened? I think quite a lot of them are. David, this is in your face. This is subversion of the country, public and European and banking money, as you said, being used to support it. It's outrageous at best. It's treason at worst.
There doesn't seem to be any shortage of money either. I've followed during the course of this week 3 separate groups, where some names come up and some groups come up, and you start to say, well, who are these people? And you end up with one of these enormous wiring diagrams. The UK call them wiring diagrams. And there's just person after person, organisation after organisation. They all serve on one another's organisations. They're all drawing a salary from somewhere. There's all these think tanks, and all of this goes pushed into government. This is where the policies, those policies that don't come from Europe, this is where the policies come from. And some of the money comes from charitable foundations. Some of the money comes from government directly, because the think tanks are actually funded to go away and think. And none of this is done out in the open. None of this is done by the public. None of this is done by the politicians. It's behind closed doors. It's in these little foundations, but there seems to be an almost inexhaustible supply of them.
Inexhaustible, because vast amounts of money, as you say, are being put into these campaigns. George Soros has spent a minimum of $2 billion on supporting change and colour revolutions in all countries, Western Europe and Eastern Europe. But here's the answer, isn't it? This is the Telegraph, and the headline just says it all. David Cameron tells Davos business leaders to help him make the case for Britain to stay in the EU. So we're going to ask for the big global corporatists and the banking interests, of course, to never mind what the British public want. Let's get the propaganda and the lies in order to pull the wool over people's faces. But I've just done a little bit of analysis there on what the press has said about David Cameron. His first loyalty, because it is unbreakable. Nothing Israel does will break David Cameron's support. So his loyalty priority number 1 clearly has got to be Israel. Number 2, well, he's saying it in the headline, it's vital we stay in and are thus regulated by the European Union. And then down at the bottom, if he's got a spare moment, well, he's going to battle a bit hard for the UK, but that'll be as a vassal of the EU. So very, very dangerous situation. And certainly UK column will be doing a lot more research onto these hidden organisations driving things forward. On that note, let's delve into money and the economy, because these are the real people pulling the levers of power. And you're picking up here on the Bank of England, sleepwalking into a financial crisis. You're picking up on oil prices. This gentleman thinks it's a bit irrational to have cheap oil because poor people could afford it. That's clearly irrational, and a rebound is inevitable. Some people don't agree with that view, and David Stockman here is warning about Italian banks. So I know Mike's got a section coming up as well. It's really over to you guys on the economy and money.
Yes, well, the mainstream, the articles I've chose there were to illustrate the mainstream view. Right? And the mainstream view that we're getting to just now is, oh yes, there's been some fluctuations in the stock market, and it's all been very bumpy, but it's all going to be fine, and we're in control, and we know what we're doing, and we have really wise heads and firm hands on the tiller. There's nothing to worry about. That's the line they're trying to put forward. And it's ridiculous, and it's looking ever more ridiculous. Look at Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen's great interest rate hike of 2015. Right? Do we all remember that? Right? 0.25%. and they were talking about having 4 more interest rates hikes in 2016. We're not talking about that anymore. No, none now. So it's one and done from Janet Yellen. That was only a month ago. These people have no idea what's happening. None, because otherwise they wouldn't have done what they've done only in December. We've got people talking about the price of oil, and it's irrational, right? The price should be higher. No, the price is the price. There are real problems in the world economy, and the price isn't going to go up. And do we not just have an agreement which is going to bring a lot more Iranian oil onto the market? That's not going to make the price go up. So what it's irrational means is we're not going to cut production. That's a very strange thing for Saudi Arabia to do. Maybe they're desperate for any sorts of money, but they're pumping a lot of oil at a loss right now. And so you have all this complete incoherence. You have this lack of any authority from the mainstream. And you have to look at people like Stockman, people like Peter Schiff, people in the sort of alternative side of things who are close enough to government to know what's going on and business to know what's going on, but have an independent view, to have any sort of information coming out about what we're actually facing. And what we're facing is an enormous hole. It may already have happened. We've got huge moves in international markets. This is going to be triggering all sorts of derivative bets that are going to be called. Will the money be there to cover them? Anything could happen. It's extremely unstable. It's extremely dangerous. And the people who are sitting there trying to pretend that they've got it all under control don't even know what's happening.
Well, David, I'm going to say I agree with everything you've just said. And, I'm just going to give another example of it here, because this is the Baltic Dry Index. We've been talking about it for quite a lot over the last few weeks. It's now hit even new lows today. But we don't need to worry because it's not apparently as a result of a collapse of demand. Because this is Tim Worstall, and he writes for Forbes and other places, and he says that it's a glut of supply. So that's okay then. He rightly points out, or he quotes somebody else who rightly points out, that between 2010 and 2013 there was quite a large increase in the world shipping fleet. But that's just about the only thing that he gets correct in this article. And because he goes on to say, it is indeed that simple. When the dry index is telling us, what the dry index is telling us is not that global trade has collapsed, rather that global trade isn't growing as fast as supply of ships capable of performing that global trade. And thus the price of trading has fallen. So there's nothing to see here then, according to him. Just as you pointed out, the oil price is a glut of supply. And, let's not worry about why there's a glut of supply. That's the reason for it, which, of course, I think is pretty much put pay to by this fact that Boeing is now cutting the production of 747s, because basically it's not just shipping that's suffering at the moment, it's also air freight. So freight of all types suffering as a result of, I think you would agree, David, what appears to be a collapse of demand rather than a glut of supply.
Yes, I mean the glut of supply argument is profoundly illiterate in economic terms. John Baptiste Say was the economist that pointed out several hundred years ago that demand is enabled by supply. You bring something to the market to sell, something that has got value, something that people want. That allows you to get something in exchange, right? It's the production of goods that people want to buy that will generate demand, because you now have something to demand, new goods in exchange for. So the idea that we have all this supply but no demand is incoherent and confused, because that could only mean that we have enormous misallocation of capital in the economy, that we're generating far too much of some things and not enough of another, so that there is no exchange taking place? And is that not, in fact, the Austrian analysis of what's been going wrong and what's not been fixed for the past couple of decades, that we don't have any recessions anymore because we just keep pumping more money in, and the misallocation of capital and the dislocations within the economy just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and ultimately it will collapse. And the longer it takes, the worse it's going to be.
Right. Look. Let's just move on, because I'm going to ask you again in a second, and we're probably running out of time, so it's probably going to have to be quite brief. But if there's an allegation about a glut supply, maybe this is what's going on here as well. Falling off a cliff, according to the Bank Underground blog. Now, anybody that doesn't know about the Bank Underground blog, this is the Bank of England's recently established blog, sort of middle of last year, I think, which is really the Bank of England's outreach to sort of pretend that they're friendly and transparent and letting us all know what's really going on in the financial system. But the article here saying, falling off a cliff, what happened to UK corporate debt, a transatlantic comparison. So this article is mostly highlighting, I should say, the differing situation between the US and the UK with regard to corporate debt levels. But it references an earlier post from July asking, are firms ever going to empty their war chests? And it reflects, in fact, an article just published in the New York Times, why are corporations hoarding trillions? And New York Times is highlighting that really the same situation with regard to cash applies in the United States and in the UK. Now, of course, this New York Times article drifts off into some of the Davos Fourth Industrial Revolution type topics that we were talking about earlier in the week. And they don't really answer why companies are hoarding cash. And in fact, it's not completely a new thing. Commentators have been asking this question since, I think, about 2012. So we might say that companies hold cash because it gives them flexibility in uncertain times. In fact, there might be two factors here. Uncertainty might be one. Credit constraints, the limitation of credit, might be the other. But in fact, the Bank Underground article claims that this is not the case. So there are no credit constraints here. This is a choice that they're making. So you might say that companies facing uncertainty about future options, they might find it that it's a good idea to pile up cash as a cushion. They might hold cash if they are considering an acquisition, or they might hold cash if they want to postpone investments until they get some clarity about what governments are going to do around various government policy and the financial system. Tim Worstel would have us believe that there's nothing to worry about. The global economy is normal. It's just a glut of supply. And yet companies are behaving in abnormal ways. So I think, David, we've entered a very abnormal phase, both financially and economically. And I think this is something we haven't seen before, certainly not in the form that it's taking. And although there are a few echoes of 2007 and what's going on at the moment, so what's your view of this? It seems like an incredible situation, as you say. Nobody really knows in the financial system, at least, what's going on.
Yes, in this situation where the future of the world economy is based on policy decisions from people like Janet Yellen, the decisions that they are making, zero interest rate policy, etc., is having fundamental changes, and that the fundamentals of the economy no longer matter, only the decisions of these people as to how much funny money they're going to print. There is enormous uncertainty. They're building an ever more unstable system. If companies are recognizing that, that's entirely sensible. In a world like this, there are only two positions to have: the liquid position and the fetal position. There's a lot of good reasons why companies would want to hold cash reserves. And also, if you are talking about zero interest rate policy, what's it costing? Nothing. It's a bizarre world, and it's a fake world, and it's a false world, but that's what has been created by our wise overlords in the Bank of England and elsewhere.
Indeed, and it's what needs to be replaced with something more durable, and I think that'll bring us nicely for next week's discussion about what's been happening around the Bradbury pound. But let's end on your, I think it's 1988 Economist front page. which has I think what's commonly known as a dicky bird with, it's the first coin of the world currency. And you'd pointed out the date on the coin is 2018. 30 seconds, please, David.
Yes, thanks to SGT report for pointing this out, that this was published all those years ago in 88. And that phoenix is arising from a pile of burning fiat worthless paper, and it has a gold coin around its neck. And yes, the date's now starting to look very interesting, is it not?
Very interesting indeed. Okay, David, thank you very, very much for joining us with excellent analysis there. We will continue to report on what happens with those refugees north of the border. UK Column's view is these people are all being used in a very cold, callous, cynical way for David Cameron's political agenda in Europe. But it does seem to us that we've now got the Scottish state with combined judiciary, police force and one single party. Now we've got Bute as the Alcatraz. We'll talk more about this next week. And some people saying they're seeing almost a tsunami coming at UK. What can we do? The answer is we've got to be prepared for that wave. We've got to be ready to ride it. What do we need to do? Inform people as to what's really happening, calm people down, get them to think in an analytical way. And of course, the last thing we need in UK is violence stirred up, I would say, by our own government, as they are so keen to do in nation states overseas. The calmer it stays, the better a chance we've got to get those criminals out of a position of power. And presumably we can find an appropriate prison for them where they won't be treated as customers. And on that happy note, we'll leave you there. We'll be back same time on Monday. Don't get down, don't get depressed. Action conquers fear. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.